All right. Yeah. So, right. I'm Jesse Schell, CEO at Schell Games. I'm going to talk today about some things I've learned making educational VR games. VR is something I've been working on a really long time. I started working on VR in the early 90s, doing graduate work at Carnegie Mellon University. I became the creative director of the Disney virtual reality studio in the 90s, where we created something called Disney Quest, which was Disney's virtual reality theme park that was installed, I think, around 96 and ran for about 20 years. In 2002, I moved to Pittsburgh, basically returning to Carnegie Mellon. I started teaching classes in virtual reality there, which I've been doing the last 20 years. And I also started a studio called Schell Games, which about 6, 7 years ago started really getting into VR once VR came into the market. And we've done a lot of different VR games at Schell Games. Some of them are entertainment games, which we've had some good success with, like I Expect You to Die and Until You Fall. But we've also done a number of educational VR games. And I'll talk about some of those today. Just for reference, our studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has about 150 people, and we do, as you can see, both entertainment and educational games. So now a lot of people ask me, do you really think VR is ready? Because there seem to be a lot of issues with VR, right? One of the big ones certainly is the question of motion sickness. Because some people say, oh, I tried VR once and I got motion sick. I guess VR is just not for me. But of course, the reality of it is that motion sickness is highly dependent, partly on the VR hardware, but much more dependent on the nature of the application that someone creates. Most video games are about running, just endlessly running and running and running and running. And those video games can sometimes have some challenge translating into VR. It's possible, but there are challenges. But interestingly, most educational experiences are not about endlessly running and running and running. They're more about stopping and solving a problem or manipulating something. And as a result, VR actually ends up being a very strong match for educational experiences. So there are a lot of, we're definitely seeing that the motion sickness problem is being overcome in general. And then specifically, I think for education, we'll see it will be less and less of a problem. And then even less of a problem as we start to move into headsets that are a mixture of VR and AR headsets, because AR works very well for a lot of educational applications. Now, other people say, well, wait a minute, how can you use this for education? It's way too expensive. It's thousands of dollars, isn't it? But it's not really. I mean, for the Oculus Quest, which has now been out for a few years, is only $399, or there's even a $299 version. And this is the dominant headset for people who are not clear on what's going on in the world of virtual reality. This headset has crushed everything else. And the reason is because it doesn't have any wires. Everyone was surprised by this. This headset is kind of lower quality than some of the ones that are out, like the ones connected to the Sony PlayStation, the ones you connect to a PC. This is actually a little lower quality, but the lack of a wire and the freedom that gives you, because this doesn't need any computing hardware at all, no phone, nothing like that. You just put it on and you go. And what we've found is that people who have the Quest headset, not only do they use it a lot, they actually purchase a lot of games as well. And we can see that there have been pushes more and more into the educational zone with the Oculus Quest. The game that we developed recently, actually, that I didn't have on the list here, there was Lost Recipes, an educational cooking game, which has done well on the Quest. Now, there's another question that comes up, the question of a hygiene in educational circumstances. Certainly when people are at home, they have their own headset, that's easy. But when you have situations where it's a school environment or a museum environment and there's a shared headset, people ask a lot of questions about that, and certainly during pandemic times. So that's a totally valid question. Normal hygiene procedures of like using simple wipes can be very effective with this. There are also solutions such as the Clean Box out there. This is a simple box. You just basically put your headset inside and you hit a button, and for 30 seconds, it uses ultraviolet light in order to sanitize it. And these things seem to be very effective. So there are certainly solutions out there. The big question is whether, where is this really going to fit in the world of educational software? Where are VR and AR going to fit? Because certainly there's the question of, are schools ready? And no, they are certainly not ready. Because one of the things we know about schools is they adopt technology slowly. And that's not a slam or an insult or anything like that. There are really good reasons they adopt technology slowly. Most early technologies are flaky and not quite ready, and schools don't have time for things that might work and might not work. That need to, oh, wait a minute, we can't run it today because we have to install an update. There's just no time for that. The school day is so tightly packed. Teachers don't have time to do a ton of work to kind of figure out, get these things working and ready. And then not to mention, these modern technologies all want to connect to the internet, which can be a real challenge for administration in schools. And this is not by any means a new problem. If you're old enough to remember when televisions started to come into schools, when was it? It was like the 1980s. Televisions came into the home in the 50s. It took about 30 years to start to use video technology in schools. And that's, I would say, about normal. Is schools tend to seriously adopt something maybe 20, 30 years after it comes out. So what I take away from this is that the path for educational VR and AR is probably not going to start out leading through the schools. It's going to be through other types of education that are not, not the direct K through 12 route. I think the focus is more likely to be on peripheral education, adult continuing education, education that people are pursuing for their own desire at home, possibly part of tutoring systems. Things that are maybe not quite so mainstream will be what leads the way. So I'm going to use some general tips that I've found in terms of creating educational VR applications. So the first one is, I think this is just a good general tip for creating VR and AR applications, is that you want to focus on the body. Many people think of VR and AR as technologies for the eyes, and they're not technologies for the eyes. They are technologies for the body. And the reason for this is that what's powerful about these experiences is the sense of physical presence that they give. This is the difference between a flat screen experience and an immersive VR experience, is the feeling that you are actually in a place. There is a part of your brain that makes a decision about whether images are just part of a flat screen or if they're really in the space with you. And VR presents a compelling enough illusion that that the brain is persuaded to treat things around you as real in VR. This is a bit of a strange thing to talk about, but the best way the way that we really see it is very often we'll have a VR experience where someone's solving a problem. It's a hard problem. And we have seen situations where there'll be a virtual table next to someone while they're solving this hard problem. And they think about it, how am I going to do this? I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And they'll reach out and they'll lean on the table. Now they know the table's not real. They know the table's not there, but nonetheless, their hand reaches out and they try and lean on it. And then they realize, oh, wait, of course that's not there. And they knew it intellectually, but their body accepted the reality of the table being there. And that's what this feeling of physical presence is like. It's very special. I mean, this is not a thing that ever happens on a TV screen. No one ever sees something on a TV or a monitor and thinks, oh, that might be in the room with me. You just don't think that. And so as a result, you have this ability to fully engage the body. It brings the body into computer simulation. So you want to ask the question, what aspect of what I'm trying to educate about involves the body? And sometimes the answer is nothing. This isn't really about the body at all. But then other times you can realize, oh wait, there are ways that possibly, like that involving the body, involving kinesthetics could really help. So one example we had was we worked on a game, Hololab Champions, which was all about learning about chemistry and chemistry lab. And we, working with high school chemistry teachers, we really saw that there was an opportunity here, because we initially thought we were going to teach about chemical reactions. And as the more we talked to teachers, we realized they didn't really have much of a need for that. That wasn't what the problem was. The problem they felt that they really needed to get across was lab skills, because people couldn't learn lab skills from a book. You can't really learn them by watching. You have to learn by doing with your hands and with your body. Simple things like, I'm going to take a graduated cylinder and place it on the counter, and I need to bend down in order to look at it at the right level. And that's the right way to look at a graduated cylinder, or the right way to gradually pour something, or the way that a scale is used. And so we realized, wow, this is a good match for virtual reality, because chemistry labs are dangerous. They have flames, they have toxins, they have glass containers, and we're asking young teenagers to handle and manipulate all these things. To be able to practice all that virtually before you go into the real lab has some benefit. So I'm going to show you the trailer from Hololab Champions so you can get a sense of it.
Welcome to the greatest event in the galaxy!
The traditional chemistry lab finally has a modern companion. Developed with input from chemistry teachers, Hololab Champions is an immersive, safe, and entertaining environment that makes mastering lab skills fun. As game show contestants, players can perform a variety of lab challenges, leading to a show-stopping final lab. Or, in practice mode, they can hone their skills on specific tasks. Players are scored on accuracy and safety as they perform work that prepares them for success in a real lab. Hololab Champions is the chemistry lab companion you've been waiting for.
Yeah, so this ended up being very effective because of the way it really brought your body into the experience. We chose a game show metaphor for it because we realized lab tasks, they're not inherently thrilling. There's a lot of weighing and measuring and balancing and checking the notebook. And by creating a kind of a game show context, it let us break these into sort of small pieces, and game shows reward all kinds of small tasks that you might perform. And so that worked out really well. And also by making it a little more interesting and flavorful, by having a host who can kind of do jokes and things, it kind of kept students engaged. So Hololab Champions, that's using your body. That's certainly one way that you can take advantage of presence. But there's another way, which is the sense of being in a place. When you do any educational experience, the main question you're really asking is, how will this experience change a person? What is the change I'm going to bring about? And one of the things a sense of presence can do, this feeling of being in a place, being in certain places can make a change. I've certainly heard people my whole life tell stories about how they visited the Anne Frank house and they came away from it with a very different understanding of what the Holocaust meant and the nature of World War II. And so someone created virtual Anne Frank house, and you can actually visit and go there, and it's a fairly intense experience because it's a place that makes a difference. The Lost Recipes cooking game that I talked about, we took a very similar approach. The idea of Lost Recipes is we take you to ancient kitchens. We take you to a kitchen in ancient Greece. We take you to a kitchen in medieval China. And you learn to cook in these places. And being in these places where you can actually manipulate the kitchen equipment and do real cooking, when will you get to do that? You don't normally get access to these sorts of ancient ways of cooking is sort of a depth of education that like being in that place really mattered. So that was a combination of using your hands and being in a place. And of course, how else can physical presence matter? So it can matter with what you manipulate. It can matter the place that you are, but it can also matter being near other people. A great experience called Injustice that was created at Carnegie Mellon University was an experience exploring the problems of police brutality. And in this experience, players are waiting at a bus stop and they observe a situation that happens where police come seemingly unjustly for someone at the bus stop and are treating them pretty badly. And you have opportunities to say something or not say something. And this is a filmed VR experience, right? So this uses sort of 3D VR filming, and it's very intense, right? And because of the way, you start just kind of having chit chat with this person at the bus stop, and then something suddenly happens, and now you have to make decisions about it. And we see an intensity with it that we don't see when it's just a flat screen, when it's just a video, because of the physical, just that sense of being there is very intimidating. There's moments when the police tell you to put your hands up, and like of course there's no hand, the game doesn't actually have a hand detector or anything, but people do it. You see that people are engaging with it because their body is in the place. And then another one that's worth thinking about is the notion of being another person, being in the place of another person and living their life and getting to see what it's like to be them. A powerful experience that was created in that area was one called Thin Line. And in Thin Line, you play as a woman who previously had an abortion and now has to go to talk to doctors about other things. And there's a well understood prejudice that many doctors and nurses have against patients who have had abortions in the past. And so this is an experience designed for doctors and nurses to sort of see it from the patient's point of view. And it ended up being a very powerful experience that way. It ended up being a good use of VR. Okay, so using the body is very important. Another thing really worth thinking about is making VR a creative tool. Most people, when they think of VR for education, they think of it, oh, I'm going to put you in this place and it's just going to pummel you with all kinds of immersive education. And sure, you can have that if you want, but opportunities to create, again, using your hands and getting in there and building things and creating things is a big power of what VR is good at, because it lets you manipulate. And of course, we know that creating things, we know constructivism, we know that these are smart ways to really engage people when it comes to education. And VR can be really excellent for that. One way that we were able to do this was we created an experience called History Maker VR, where you step into the shoes of a historical figure. And of course, when people normally think of, oh, wow, this is going to be a historical experience, you're going to live in the time of that person and you live and see their whole world. Well, it is so crazy expensive and difficult to build a whole world, a whole historical context. That isn't what we did. Instead, we built these avatars, we created some props that they might have, and then we put them in a television studio. And one of the things we find with young teenagers today is they are very oriented towards creating videos. The ability to create interesting, compelling, novel videos is a huge part of social currency for them. So the idea of History Maker VR is you get to be a historical figure, in a television studio. You can write a little speech and upload it to the teleprompters, and now you can give a speech as one of the figures here. So I'll show you the trailer for that.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Welcome to today's Social Studies classroom, where the virtual reality content creation tool, History Maker VR, can enhance the learning experience. Students can immerse themselves in history while showing off their knowledge by embodying 8 diverse characters across U.S. history, from Ben Franklin to Sonia Sotomayor. It's easy to use. Students set up the scene and select their props, create their performance, import their script, and start recording. Export, edit, and share their performances with teachers and classmates.
So what we found really powerful about this, many students are very shy about getting up in front of a class and talking about a topic. And we've seen that students who are often kind of cripplingly, painfully shy are more than happy to kind of go off privately, put on this virtual mask, and then do a performance. And that's some of the best feedback we've gotten from teachers, is the students that it's brought out of their shell. Students who have barely said a thing all semester suddenly are doing these dramatic, interesting, engaging performances. And so thinking of virtual reality as a performance art medium is a great way to think about it. So tip number 3, you want to design for both teachers and for students. Not just, if you just think about designing for the person who's going to use it, sometimes you miss the boat. And if you just think about designing for the teachers, that can be a problem because it can bore the students. And so that was sort of something we thought about with both Hololab Champions and History Maker. With Hololab Champions, we needed to make sure that we had the rigorous curriculum in there. We provided lesson plans so that teachers could use this. But at the same time, we tried to make a tone that the students would care about. And so one of the questions, for example, is, can you do unsafe things in the lab? Teachers would say, oh no, of course, no one should ever be allowed to do anything unsafe. But students, of course, really want to do this. And so in the game, we allow you to do this, but we call it out as something dangerous, and there are penalties for it. But you can still do it. If you decide you want to pick up all the glassware and just smash it against the wall, you can. And in some ways, we often find this is something very important, because first of all, people always explore boundaries, especially teenagers. They're all about exploring boundaries. They want to explore boundaries of the simulation. How far does it let me go? And if you don't let them cross the boundaries, they often feel disrespected. They feel like they're being treated as untrustworthy, as babies. And if you do let them cross the boundaries, they often will respect the simulation a great deal more. So a 4th tip is thinking about educational fantasy. It's too easy when you're educating just to think about facts, right? What are the facts that we have to get across? And we don't always think about the importance of fantasy, because people do have fantasies about that are connected to education. And when you can use the technology to do that, it can be very powerful. So one, for example, that we'd worked on was Deep Time Detectives. This was a VR experience that we created for the Smithsonian in conjunction with their new dinosaur hall. And we did this as an experience designed for a family. Now, a real problem in the museum with the family is if somebody puts on if a child, for example, puts on a headset and the parent can't see what's going on, they get very nervous. Like, what's going on? What is this? That doesn't feel like a responsible thing for them to do. And so the way this experience works is one person in a group puts on a headset, and then the rest of the group has a big screen. And they can sort of see what this person sees, but then they also see other information. And we intentionally created an experience that requires both to work together on this. And so I'll show you a video here just talking about engaging the fantasy. So this is the fantasy of being a paleontologist. And so I'll show you just a little clip of the beginning of it here.
Look to your right. Pick up the red and cover the mystery software up below. This is a very fast brush. I'm the of your life.
That's way better than the dinosaur museum.
Yeah,
It's just a list.
This looks like a dinosaur. This looks like a T-Rex.
So my partner's uncovering a mystery fossil. What kind of animal could it be?
So yeah, so you see there, we're using the brush to uncover the fossil. Now, we didn't need to do that. We're just trying to present the fossil. There's no real education much that really happens by letting them brush it off, but brushing off the fossil is a big part of the paleontologist fantasy. And you heard how excited they were, like, oh wow, this is like real life. Oh wow, this is so much better than the dinosaur museum. And by doing that, by letting them, again, use their hands and become their fantasy of what it means to be the paleontologist, you draw them in, and now this starts to matter for them. And so that leads to the next tip, which is involve the spectators. Now, as I mentioned, this is an experience not just for one person wearing it, but it's designed for the spectators and the person in VR to be working together. We took a lot of inspiration from a game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, in which I think you can see there's one person there wearing a headset, and they're trying to defuse a bomb. And everyone else has all these printed out instructions about how to defuse the bomb. But of course, the person in the headset doesn't have those. So there's all this conversation back and forth about, well, wait a minute, how many wires are there? And they have to look up with the manual. Okay, 5 wires. Okay, is there a red wire? And you get all this conversation going. And a lack of balanced information often creates great conversation. So we took that as inspiration because that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted a healthy conversation between the person in the headset and the family outside the headset. And so you can see a little of that interaction here.
Closely related animals have bones with similar features. I told you to. Okay. We'll tell you where to search. I mean, where to search that.
Back, hind leg.
Oh. Your fossil.
I don't even know what that means.
The partner is looking at an ankle bow diagram from the 2 animal groups. Describe your fossil and make sure to look at the red arrows. Discuss which of the 2 groups matches your fossil. We got seal dog group, whale deer group.
You want to do? You want to go?
I'm gonna do whale deer group because that looks like a deer.
Okay.
Like you see like the head features and the
So there, I think you're able to get a sense of it. The person in the headset, they don't have all the information that the spectators have, and this sort of forces them to have this conversation. Is this in the whale deer group or in another group? And by kind of looking at the fossils. So the person in the headset has the ability to look at, manipulate the fossil. Outside, they have information about different types of fossils, and this gets a great conversation going. So anyway, so those are some tips we found really useful for creating educational VR experiences. And so, you might be wondering, like, okay, well, that's all fine, but is this something that I want to, get involved with? Is it still really, isn't it, this isn't going to be mainstream yet. So do I even want to bother with it if it's not mainstream? And I say, I think I like to look back at the early days of educational video games, right? Like I look back at the Oregon Trail, which was a game created in 1971, right? This is when this game was originally created. And here we are over 50 years later with this game. The game is still played. And more importantly than the fact that it's played or not played is the fact that it really set a course for other educational games in this space. Sure, it took at least 10 years before it was played widely, but by being there at the beginning, that's when you get the opportunity to invent the future. And that's the opportunity we have right now. If you're interested in VR, AR for education, nope, it's not going to be mainstream right now, But if you want to invent it and set the paths that people are going to be following for the next 30, 50, 100 years, this is definitely the time. All right, so thank you very much.